The morning my son and his wife won $48 million, they told me to leave their house. Just like that. No warning, no gratitude, no love. They looked me in the eye and said, "Wow, we don't need your pension money anymore. Go find somewhere else to live." I'd lived there since my husband died, cooking, cleaning, taking care of their children, even paying rent from my small check. I thought I was helping my family. Turns out I was just convenient. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I looked at them, smiled, and said, "Sweetheart, did you even check whose name is on that ticket?" That was the moment everything turned upside down. If you've ever been taken for granted, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss how it all unfolded. The morning my son and his wife won $48 million, they told me to leave their house. I didn't see it coming. One minute we were talking about breakfast. The next minute I was standing there with a coffee cup in my hand, and my daughter-in-law was saying words I'll never forget. "We don't need your little pension anymore, Evelyn. You can leave now." She said it like it was nothing, like asking someone to pass the salt. I looked at her and thought maybe I'd heard wrong, but her face told me everything. She meant it. My son Brian was standing behind her. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking down like a child caught doing something wrong. I waited for him to speak up, to tell her to stop, to say, "Mom, she didn't mean it that way." But he didn't. He just looked away. I asked quietly, "You want me to leave?" Lauren crossed her arms and said, "We just think it's time, Evelyn. Things are different now. We don't need help with the bills, and honestly, we'd like our space back." Their space. That's what she called it. For 2 years, I had cooked in that kitchen, cleaned those rooms, folded their laundry, helped with their children. I'd used my own money to pay half the groceries, half the electric bill. I thought I was doing my part. I thought I was helping my family. But standing there that morning, I realized something. I hadn't been helping. I'd been paying rent for their kindness. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I see," I said. "And when do you want me gone?" Lauren looked at Brian, then back at me. "Well, we're not monsters, Evelyn. Take a few days. Just don't drag it out." Not monsters. That was the word she used. I think she believed it too. Brian finally spoke. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know we love you. We just need some space." I looked right at him. "You need space from your mother?" He didn't answer. He never does when he's guilty. It's strange how quickly things can change. One day you're family, the next you're a problem that needs to be solved. I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't want to cry in front of them. I'd already given them enough power over me. So I took a breath and I said, "Lauren, did you even look at the name on that ticket?" She frowned. "What?" I repeated, calm and clear. "The winning ticket." "Did you read whose name is on it?" She looked confused. Brian looked scared. I just smiled, not out of pride, not out of anger, just the kind of smile that comes when you finally stop pretending you don't see the truth. "I'll start packing," I said, and I turned away. I went upstairs to my room. It used to be called the guest room, though I was no guest. The word made it sound like I didn't belong there. Maybe that's how they'd felt all along. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked around. I'd already packed a few boxes. I didn't even know why. Maybe some part of me knew this day would come. People like Lauren don't share power. They just borrow it until they think they can do better. I reached for my purse. Inside was a small envelope, my lottery ticket. Same numbers I'd played for 32 years. The same numbers my husband Henry helped me pick before he passed away. He used to joke that one day those numbers would change everything. Turns out he was right. I looked at that ticket and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not relief, just quiet peace. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew I had a choice. I wasn't trapped anymore. Downstairs, I could hear them talking. Lauren's voice was sharp, excited, already planning how to spend money she thought belonged to her. Brian tried to keep up, asking about houses, cars, new plans. I didn't listen. Their words didn't matter anymore. People show you who they are when they think they don't need you. And that morning, I saw my son and his wife for who they really were. Not evil, just selfish. They wanted the win without the work, the wealth without the warmth. I folded the ticket and put it back in my purse. I didn't say anything to them for the rest of the day. I just kept my routine. Made lunch, cleaned the kitchen, smiled when they looked at me, even when it hurt. They thought they'd already won, but they didn't know the real story hadn't even started yet. People think justice comes from courts or lawyers. It doesn't. Sometimes it comes from patience. Sometimes it comes in silence. Let me take you 3 weeks back, to the day everything started quietly before the world turned upside down. I've lived in Maple Harbor most of my life. It's a small town by the coast in Oregon. Everyone knows everyone. You can walk down Main Street and hear someone calling your name from across the bakery. The air always smells like salt and fish, and the wind never stops blowing. Most people here work on boats or in the small shops by the dock. It's not fancy, but it's home. I used to teach first grade at the little elementary school 2 blocks from the church. 34 years, same building, same smell of chalk and glue sticks. I loved those kids. They used to draw me pictures of whales and flowers and stick them on my desk. Some of them still stop me on the street to say hi, even though they're grown with kids of their own now. That part of my life ended when my husband Henry got sick. He passed away 2 years ago, cancer. It was quick, but it left a hole nothing could fill. After the funeral, my son Brian said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that house. Come stay with us. It'll be easier." I didn't argue. I didn't want to rattle around in an empty house filled with memories and silence. I told myself it would just be temporary. Maybe a few months, maybe a year. Just until I figured out what life looked like without Henry. Brian and his wife Lauren lived up the hill, in one of those newer homes with big windows and white walls that never feel warm, no matter how high you turn the heat. She called it the Harper Residence. That made me laugh the first time I heard it. I called it something else in my head, the house with no warmth. They had everything modern. Marble counters, shiny floors, a huge TV on the wall, but no laughter. Not the kind that comes easy, the kind Henry and I used to have when we'd burn dinner or dance in the kitchen, just because the radio was playing an old song. When I first moved in, it wasn't so bad. Lauren tried to sound cheerful. She showed me the guest room, said she'd decorated it special for me. It was nice enough, small, neat, plain. She told me, "You'll have your own space here, Evelyn. You'll feel right at home." And for a little while I did. I helped with dinner, I folded laundry. I picked up the kids from school when they were busy. They never asked, but they never told me to stop either. At the end of the first month, Lauren came to me with a printed list. She said, "We've added up the household expenses. We'd like to split them fairly." I asked her what that meant. She said, "Just a small contribution, about $1,100 a month. It helps balance everything." $1,100. That was almost my entire pension check. I didn't argue. I didn't want to cause trouble. I told myself, it's still cheaper than living alone. But deep down, I knew what it was. It wasn't a contribution, it was rent. Rent to live in my son's house. They called it cost sharing. I called it the rent for love. At first, it didn't bother me as much. As you'd think, I was still grieving. I was lonely. I told myself I was lucky to have family to stay with, but over time, things started to change. Lauren stopped saying, "Good morning." She started leaving lists on the counter, things she wanted me to do. "Can you pick up the kids today? Can you start dinner before we get home? The guest bathroom needs cleaning." It wasn't asked as a favor, it was expected. Brian worked long hours, or that's what he said. Most nights, he came home late, ate dinner without a word, and went straight to his office. When I tried to talk to him, he'd say, "Mom, not now. I'm tired." The only one who made that house feel alive was my granddaughter, Ellie. She's 9. Bright, funny, full of questions. She'd run into my room after school and throw herself on my bed like she owned the place. "Grandma, guess what?" she'd say, out of breath, telling me everything that happened at school that day. I'd listen, even if she talked for an hour. When she smiled, I saw a little bit of Henry in her, the same spark in her eyes. We'd bake cookies together, sometimes behind her mom's back. Lauren didn't like messes in the kitchen, but Ellie and I didn't care. We'd make a mess anyway and clean it up before she came home. Those were the moments that reminded me why I was still there. Ellie was my reason for staying. Without her, I think I would have left a long time ago. I remember one evening she said, "Grandma, why do you live in our guest room? Shouldn't you have your own house?" I smiled and told her, "This is just for now, sweetie." She said, "When I grow up, you can live with me. I won't charge you rent." I laughed, but inside it broke my heart a little. She was 9, and somehow she already understood what her parents didn't. That's the thing about Maple Harbor. People here value family. They help each other. They bring soup when someone's sick, mow each other's lawns, keep an eye on the old folks, But in that big house on the hill, kindness had rules, and every favor had a price. I stayed quiet. I didn't want to upset anyone. I told myself just get through another week, help out, keep the peace. But every month when Lauren handed me that little list of shared costs, something inside me got smaller. I stopped feeling like a mother. I started feeling like a tenant. And even though the house looked perfect from the outside, I knew better. Perfect things are often the coldest ones. Still, every morning when I woke up, Ellie's laughter reminded me that some part of this family still had a heart. She'd hug me and say, "You make better pancakes than Mommy." I'd laugh, even when I didn't feel like laughing, because when you love someone, you hold on to the small things that still feel right, even when everything else starts to go wrong. Sometimes I still talk to Henry when the house is quiet. I know he's gone, but old habits don't die easy. He used to listen better than anyone. I'll sit on the edge of the bed, look at the empty chair by the window, and whisper what happened that day. I guess it makes me feel like he's still looking out for me somehow. Henry was a good man. He worked as a journalist for most of his life. Small-town paper, local stories. He wasn't famous, but everyone respected him. He had this calm way of seeing things that other people missed. When he talked, you listened, not because he was loud, but because he was right. He loved Brian deeply. Our boy was his pride. Henry used to tell him stories about where we came from, how his own father worked at the docks, how we saved every dollar to buy our first little house. He wanted Brian to know that hard work meant something. One night, I still remember it like it was yesterday, Henry told Brian, "A man who forgets his roots loses his soul." Brian was about 16 then. He nodded, said he understood. I believed him. But life has a way of testing what people really understand. When Henry got sick, Brian came home less often. He said work was busy, that he'd visit when he could. I tried not to judge. Everyone handles grief differently. But when Henry passed, I think something in Brian closed off completely. The day of the funeral is burned into my memory. It was cold. People came, said nice things, then left like they always do. After everyone was gone, Brian took my hand. His eyes were red. He said, "Mom, don't worry. I'll take care of you. I promise." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But promises are easy when you're standing in a cemetery holding flowers. Keeping them takes something stronger than words. At first, he did try. He called every night, came by every weekend. Then it became once a week, then once a month. And when I finally moved in with him and Lauren, the words "I'll take care of you" started sounding different. Like a responsibility, not a promise. I think about Henry a lot during those moments. He'd have known what to say. He always did. He had this little tradition every year on my birthday. He'd buy me a Powerball ticket. It started as a joke when we were first married. He'd hand it to me and say, "Here you go, Evie. One day this will buy us a boat." We never got that boat, but he never missed a year. Even when we were short on money, he'd still show up with that little white ticket tucked inside my birthday card. After a few years, I started using the same numbers every time, the ones that meant something to us. The day we met, our wedding date, Brian's birthday, our old house number, little pieces of our life. 30 years later, I still play those same numbers. The last ticket Henry ever bought me was 2 years ago. It came with my final birthday card from him. I remember opening it that morning, his handwriting, shaky but still his. Inside the card was the ticket and a small note that said, "Luck finds those who wait." At the time, I thought he meant patience, that if I just kept going, things would get better. I didn't know he meant something else. I didn't know he meant justice. That ticket is still in my notebook. I keep it inside a small brown leather journal Henry gave me the year we married. It's full of little things, grocery lists, old recipes, reminders, tiny pieces of our life together. But tucked between those pages, that Powerball ticket sits inside the birthday card, right under his handwriting. Sometimes I take it out just to read that line again. Luck finds those who wait. It feels like he's talking to me even now. After he passed, I'd read it whenever things got hard, when the house felt too quiet, when Brian stopped calling, when I felt more like a burden than a mother. It reminded me to keep going, to stay kind even when kindness wasn't returned. But these last 2 years, something changed. I started seeing that message differently. Maybe luck isn't about waiting for something good to happen. Maybe it's about waiting long enough for the truth to catch up with the people who've forgotten it. Henry would have understood that. He used to say life always finds a way to balance itself, not quickly, but surely. I used to laugh at him for saying it like a reporter writing headlines for Karma. Now, I think he was right. He believed in fairness, in decency, in giving people second chances but never letting them walk over you twice. He used to tell me, "Evie, you can forgive anyone, but don't forget who they showed you they are." I wish Brian had listened to his father more. There's a part of me that still hopes he remembers those lessons. The man who forgets his roots loses his soul. Henry's words, not mine. Sometimes I wonder if my son even remembers hearing them, because the boy I raised would never have treated me the way he did. The boy I raised would have stood between me and the woman who called me a burden. The boy I raised would have said, "Mom stays with us as long as she wants." But that boy is gone, replaced by a man who measures love in convenience. Still, every time I look at that old ticket, I feel Henry somewhere close. Maybe not in the room, but in the way things are starting to shift. The way truth slowly finds the people who deserve to see it. I used to pray for patience. Now, I think Henry left me something stronger. A quiet kind of justice that takes its time, but never misses its mark. Lauren always liked to call things meetings. She said it made everything more organized. So one Saturday morning, she called for what she called a family meeting. Brian sat at the head of the table with a mug of coffee. Lauren stood at the counter holding a folder full of papers. I already knew something was coming. I'd seen her printing those papers the night before. She spread them out on the table. "These are the household expenses," she said, tapping the pages like she was leading a business presentation. "Electricity, water, food, internet, heating, maintenance." I added everything up. Brian nodded like a good assistant. Lauren smiled politely, too polite, the kind of smile that hides a sharp edge. "Let's make this fair, Evelyn. You use the utilities too?" Fair. That word again. She went down the list. $210 for utilities, $380 for groceries, $200 for shared maintenance, and a few other things I didn't even understand. The total came to $1,100. She looked pleased with herself when she said the number out loud, like she'd just solved a complicated math problem. I nodded slowly. "All right," I said quietly. Lauren's smile widened. "I knew you'd understand." But understanding wasn't the same as agreeing. Inside, something in me went cold. They called it fairness. But when someone calls exploitation fairness, you start to see who they are. I took the list from her, folded it neatly, and put it in my purse. "I'll handle it," I said. She seemed surprised, maybe even a little disappointed that I didn't argue. I think she wanted me to, so she could call me difficult or ungrateful. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. After that day, everything changed, though no one said anything out loud. Lauren started tracking everything I did. If I used the washing machine twice in a week, she made a comment about water bills. If I cooked dinner, she mentioned groceries being expensive. I started feeling like a tenant in a house I used to call home. Brian avoided the tension by pretending not to notice. He'd come home, say hi, and disappear into his office. The house was big, but it felt smaller every day, full of invisible lines I wasn't supposed to cross. I kept paying every month right on time. Lauren always thanked me with a tight smile and said, "We appreciate your contribution." Contribution. That word made my stomach turn. It wasn't a contribution. It was rent for love. Every dollar I handed over bought me silence, the right to stay one more month in a place where I wasn't wanted. I told myself to be patient, to keep the peace. Ellie still ran into my room every evening with her drawings and stories, and that was enough reason to stay a little longer. But even that small comfort started changing. Lauren began sending Ellie to her room more often, saying, "Let Grandma rest. She needs quiet." Quiet was the last thing I needed. Quiet was where sadness grows. One night after dinner, I stayed up to finish washing the dishes. The kitchen was dark except for the small light over the sink. I could hear Lauren in the living room, talking on the phone. Her voice carried easily through the open space. "I swear, it's like having live-in help who pays rent," she said, laughing. There was a pause, then her friend must have said something funny because she laughed again. Loud, happy, careless. I froze. The dishcloth slipped from my hand into the sink. I stood there, water still running, listening. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. "Yeah," she said, still laughing. "It's actually perfect. She cooks, cleans, watches the kids, and the best part? She covers part of the bills. I should write a book about this." Her voice faded as she walked farther from the kitchen. The light above me flickered once, then turned off completely, leaving the room dim and cold. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the dark, my hands wet, my heart heavier than it had been in years. I thought of Henry then, how he used to say, "People show their true face when they think no one's watching." Lauren had just shown me hers. From that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't tell Brian what I heard. I just went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the old leather notebook where I kept the lottery ticket. It was still there, tucked safely inside Henry's birthday card. I opened it, read his note again. Luck finds those who wait. That night, I understood what he meant. Not luck, justice. Some things don't need to be confronted. They reveal themselves. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I turned off the lamp, lay down, and whispered to myself, "Let them think they've won. The world has a funny way of keeping score." Downstairs, I could still hear Lauren's laughter echoing faintly through the floor, but it didn't hurt anymore. It just sounded like the beginning of the end. Lauren loved to throw parties. She said they kept her connected. What she meant was that she liked being seen, liked people to know how well she was doing. So when she planned her wine and wealth night, no one was surprised. She said it was just a casual get-together for neighbors and some business acquaintances. But by Friday evening, the house looked like a showroom. Candles lit, glasses polished, table covered in imported cheese and expensive wine bottles lined up like trophies. I spent most of the afternoon helping her set up. She didn't ask, but she didn't stop me either. That's how things worked between us. I did the work, she took the credit. By 7, guests started arriving. The women wore glittering dresses, the men wore jackets even though it was too warm inside. I moved between the kitchen and the living room, refilling glasses, clearing plates, smiling when people smiled at me. It's funny how invisible you can become in your own family's home. I was setting out a tray of crackers when a man I didn't recognize waved his glass toward me. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of person who talked with confidence because he'd never had to question himself. "And who's your lovely staff?" he asked, looking right at me. There was a pause, one of those awkward silences that hangs in the air too long, and then laughter. Real laughter. From the whole group. Lauren laughed loudest. "Oh, that's not staff," she said quickly. "That's Evelyn, my mother-in-law." The man looked a bit embarrassed, but the damage was already done. Someone else, I think it was one of Lauren's friends from her yoga class, added, "Well, you've got yourself a pretty devoted helper there." More laughter. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, the kind of small, polite smile people give when they've learned that defending themselves only makes things worse. I picked up an empty plate and walked back to the kitchen. From the doorway, I could still hear them talking, laughing, clinking glasses. My name became part of a story I didn't belong in. "Evelyn makes the best casseroles," someone said. "She's like a live-in chef." Lauren laughed again. "Oh, she's much more than that." Their voices blurred after that. I didn't want to hear anymore. As I turned to rinse the dishes, I felt someone watching me. I looked up, and there she was. Marjorie Quinn. It took me a moment to recognize her. She used to live 2 streets over when Henry was alive. Her husband Carl owned one of the fishing companies in town. They'd had us over for dinner more times than I could count. Henry and Marjorie used to argue about politics, always ending with laughter. Now she stood in the doorway, glass of red wine in her hand, eyes steady on me. She didn't laugh like the others. She just looked, long enough for me to understand that she knew exactly what was happening. I dried my hands and forced a smile. "Marjorie," I said softly, "it's been years." She nodded. "Too many." For a second, she looked like she wanted to say something, but Lauren appeared beside her, talking fast, pulling her back toward the living room. I watched them go. Marjorie glanced back once before disappearing around the corner. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The laughter, the music, the smell of expensive wine. All of it felt distant, like I was standing outside my own life looking in through the window. I stayed until the guests left, cleaned the glasses, folded the tablecloth, put away the dishes. Lauren thanked me once, half-heartedly, before heading upstairs with Brian. I was about to turn off the kitchen light when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Marjorie. She'd waited until everyone else was gone. She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. "You deserve better, Evelyn," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. She squeezed my hand gently, the way only someone who truly understands can. Then she said, "You call me if you ever need anything. Anything." And then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door she'd just walked through. It had been 2 years since anyone said something kind to me, without expecting something back. 2 years since someone saw me not as a burden, but as a person. That night, after the house went quiet, I lay in bed thinking about Marjorie, about Henry, about all the small humiliations I'd let slide, because I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping love. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's permission. Lauren thought she'd thrown another successful party. She didn't realize she'd given me a witness. Someone who saw through the performance. Someone who saw the truth. She was the only one who saw the truth that night. And the funny thing about truth is, once it's seen, it doesn't stay quiet for long. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Lauren called me into the dining room. She had papers spread out across the table again, the same way she had during her cost-sharing talk months ago. But this time, there were drawings instead of lists. Brian was there too, sitting with his coffee, eyes already tired. I'd learned to read that look, the look of a man who didn't want to be part of the conversation, but didn't have the courage to leave it either. Lauren smiled that same tight smile she always used before she said something she thought sounded kind. "Evelyn," she began, "we've been thinking about how to make everyone more comfortable." I didn't answer. I waited. She turned one of the drawings toward me. "This is the new layout for the basement. We're planning to turn it into a private suite for you. Your own space." I looked down at the paper. The lines were thin, rushed. A little box labeled bedroom. Another marked bathroom. A small square at the corner labeled kitchenette. No windows, no sunlight. Just 4 walls and a door that led to the side yard. Lauren pointed with her pen. "See? You'll have everything you need. Your own entrance, your own area to cook and relax. We'll even get you a little TV down there. You won't have to share the main kitchen anymore." I stared at the blueprint for a long time. The paper looked cleaner than the idea. Brian spoke softly, as if rehearsed. "It's a win-win, Mom. You'll get your privacy and we'll get ours." Privacy, that word again. I'd heard it too many times lately, always dressed up to sound generous. I kept my voice even. "So, this is where I'll live?" Lauren nodded, pleased. "It'll be nice, Evelyn. You'll be right here with us, but with your own independence. And honestly, it'll free up space upstairs. We've been thinking of turning your room into a home office." I looked back down at the paper. The bedroom barely fit a twin bed. The kitchenette was smaller than a closet. The air in that imaginary basement already felt tight. I smiled a little. "It's perfect," I said quietly. "Just enough space to bury what's left of me." Lauren blinked, confused. Brian frowned. "Mom, please don't be dramatic." I looked at him, really looked at him. My son. The same boy who used to leave me notes on the fridge that said, "Love you, Mom," before school. The boy who cried when he broke his arm at 8, who asked me once if heaven had bicycles. That boy was gone. All that was left was a man who wanted his mother stored under his house like an unwanted memory. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back toward Lauren. "Sounds wonderful," I said. "I'll think about it." She smiled again, relieved. "Good. We're getting estimates from contractors this week. The cheaper one said it can be done by spring." "Of course," she said, "cheaper one." Brian stood, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "See, I told you Mom would understand." I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. The rest of the afternoon passed in silence. Lauren went back to her laptop. Brian left for work. The house felt emptier than usual, even with all its noise. When the rain started around 5, I grabbed my coat and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just needed air, the kind that didn't come through their filtered vents or taste like someone else's control. The wind off the ocean was sharp and wet. I walked down the hill, past the houses with their tidy lawns and porch lights, past the church where Henry and I used to sit on Sundays. The rain hit hard, soaking through my coat, but I didn't care. I ended up at Cal Murphy's Market. It's a small grocery store on the corner, the same one I've been going to since I was young. The bell over the door still rings when you walk in. Cal's son runs the place now, young man named Jimmy. He looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "Evening, Mrs. Harper. Rough weather out there." "Nothing I haven't walked through before," I said, brushing the water from my sleeves. He laughed. "You want your usual?" I nodded. My usual. Milk, bread, a pack of tea bags, and one lottery ticket. Same numbers, same habit. As he printed the ticket, he said, "You've been playing these same numbers for years, huh?" 32, I said, give or take. He smiled again. Well, maybe this'll be your lucky week. Maybe, I said. Luck's got strange timing. I paid, tucked the ticket into my purse, and stood for a moment by the window. Outside, the rain came down harder, blurring the lights of the street. I thought about that basement drawing. No windows, no light. A room that wasn't meant for living, just for existing. Lauren said it would give me independence. But what she really wanted was distance. And as I stood there watching the storm, I realized something Henry once said was true. People don't always need to push you out of their lives. Sometimes they just build walls high enough that you start walking out on your own. I left the store, the bell ringing softly behind me. The street was empty, my shoes soaked through. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped. I felt awake. Cal Murphy's Market hasn't changed much in 40 years. The same flickering sign, the same squeaky floorboard by the counter, the same faint smell of coffee and newspaper ink. Cal's still there, though slower now. He's 73 and walks with a limp from a bad fall a few winters back. But his eyes are still sharp, full of the kind of humor that only comes from seeing too much life and not letting it make you bitter. He looked up when I came in, rain dripping off my coat. "Still playing the same numbers, huh?" he asked, already reaching for the lottery slips. I smiled a little. "They've never failed me, Cal," I said quietly. "Only people have," he chuckled. "Well, if anyone's due for some luck, it's you." "I'm not looking for luck," I said, pulling a 5 from my wallet. "Just balance." He nodded, maybe not understanding, but kind enough not to ask. As he printed the ticket, I thought about all the years I'd stood in that same spot. Different clothes, different seasons, same hope folded inside a little slip of paper. When Henry was alive, we used to buy the ticket together. He'd hand it to me and say, "You never know, Evie. Maybe this is the week." The week never came. But somehow it always felt like a promise between us, something that kept him close even after he was gone. Cal slid the ticket across the counter. "Here you go. Don't lose it." "I never do," I said. I folded the ticket carefully the way I always do and walked over to the small table by the window. I took out my wallet, old brown leather, the edges worn soft after decades of use. Inside was a folded birthday card, the last one Henry ever gave me. I opened it just enough to slip the new ticket inside, right next to the faded handwriting that read, "Luck finds those who wait." Then I closed it again, slowly, like sealing a promise. If someone had been watching, they'd probably think it was nothing, just an old woman putting away her groceries. But to me, it felt like a ritual, a small act of faith in a world that hadn't been fair in a long time. Cal called out from the counter, "You want me to walk you to your car? It's coming down pretty hard." I shook my head. "I'll walk. Rain never hurt anyone who's already soaked." He laughed softly. "You take care, Evelyn." "Always do," I said, even though we both knew that wasn't true. Outside, the rain hit hard, steady and cold. It soaked through my shoes in minutes, but I didn't hurry. I liked the way it sounded on the pavement, like a rhythm the world had forgotten. The streetlights blurred through the water on my glasses. The air smelled like salt and wet earth. Every step felt heavier, but in a strange way. Lighter, too. Like something inside me was finally letting go. Halfway up the hill, I stopped and looked back toward the town. The harbor lights shimmered through the rain. Somewhere, church bells were ringing the half hour, the same bells that used to mark the end of Henry's workday. I thought about him, about the promise he'd made me once when things were hard. No matter how bad it gets, Evie, don't let them make you small. You were meant to stand tall, even if you're standing alone. For months, I'd been shrinking to fit into a life that wasn't mine, doing chores, paying bills, pretending it was enough. But standing there in the rain, I realized I didn't feel small anymore, just tired. Tired of pretending that love meant keeping quiet. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered into the night, "If there's any justice left in the world, let it find me." It wasn't a prayer for money. It wasn't even a prayer for revenge. It was a prayer for something I used to believe in. Fairness, decency, balance. The kind of justice Henry believed the world still had somewhere. The rain ran down my face, mixing with tears I didn't bother to wipe away. No one was there to see anyway. By the time I reached the house, the lights were off. Lauren and Brian were already asleep, the kids too. I slipped off my shoes, hung my coat, and went to my room, the guest room. I sat on the bed, took my wallet from my purse, and looked at the birthday card one last time before setting it on the nightstand. Then I turned off the light and lay down, listening to the wind outside. For the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped. Just waiting. And waiting, I knew now, wasn't weakness. It was how justice learned to find its way home. That night, the snow started falling early, thick and heavy, the kind that makes the world go quiet. The house was still. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. It was almost 11 when the Powerball numbers came on TV. I wasn't even really watching. It was just background noise, something to fill the empty air. But when the announcer said, "Tonight's jackpot is $48 million," something in me sat up a little straighter. The man's voice was calm, cheerful. And the first number is 8. 8. I froze. 8. The day Henry and I got engaged. We were sitting on a park bench, hands shaking from nerves and cold, when he pulled a ring out of his pocket and said, "You and me, Evie. That's all I want." The announcer continued, "Next number, 15. 15. The day Brian was born." I could still see the hospital room, the way Henry cried harder than I did. He kept saying, "He's perfect, Evie. You did it." The third number rolled on screen. 26. My chest tightened. 26. The day Henry died. 2 years ago in that same cold December light. I had held his hand until it went still, whispering every prayer I knew, even ones I didn't believe in anymore. The fourth number came next. 33. 33, my first year teaching. The year I found out I was good at something, that I could make a difference in someone's life. Then came the fifth. 47. I whispered it before the announcer did. 47, the number of our old house by the sea. The house Henry built with his own hands, the one that smelled like coffee and salt, and the pages of the books we used to read before bed. The final ball spun slowly before it dropped. And the Powerball number is 19. 19. The age I was when I met Henry for the first time. My hands started shaking. I grabbed the remote and rewound the screen just to be sure. 8, 15, 26, 33, 47, Powerball 19. Every number, every single one. My eyes went to the nightstand. My wallet was there, still damp from the rain earlier. I reached for it, fingers trembling. The old leather creaked as I opened it. Inside the birthday card, the ticket sat waiting. Dry, perfect, unassuming. I lifted it out slowly, reading each number again, my breath catching with every match. 8, 15, 26, 33, 47, Powerball 19. The tears came without warning. Not the loud kind, just quiet ones that ran down my face and wouldn't stop. "Henry," I whispered, my voice breaking, "you did it." I laughed through the tears, not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. Because for the first time in so long, something finally felt fair. I sat there for a while, holding the ticket in both hands. The snow outside made everything glow white through the curtains. The rest of the house slept, unaware that everything had just changed. No one knew. Not Lauren, not Brian, not anyone. Just me and Henry. I could almost hear his voice, low and steady in my ear. "Told you, Evie, luck finds those who wait." I folded the ticket carefully, slid it back into the card, and tucked it into the small wooden drawer by my bed, the one where I kept my wedding ring and a few old photographs. Then I sat down and opened my journal. It was an old notebook, the same one I'd been writing in since Henry passed. I flipped through the pages. Lists, thoughts, small pieces of my days. Notes like, "Ellie baked cookies today," or "Lauren's tone got sharper again." Little pieces of survival. I found a blank page and wrote, "December 12th, 10:59 p.m. Henry's numbers came alive tonight. If this isn't justice, I don't know what is." Then I closed the book and sat quietly. Outside, the wind picked up. I could hear it rattling the window frames. I didn't feel fear or joy, just calm. Deep, quiet calm. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder how to make it through another day. The future was sitting in that drawer, folded neatly inside a birthday card. I could already picture Lauren's face when she realized. The way her smile would tighten, the way Brian would stutter, trying to sound reasonable. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But that would come later. For now, it was just me, Henry, and the sound of the snow falling against the glass. I turned off the TV, leaving the room in darkness except for the faint glow of the clock. Midnight. "Good night, Henry," I whispered. "You finally kept your promise." And for the first time in a long time, I slept without fear. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of winter light that makes everything look faded. Snow still covered the front yard, thick and untouched. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and floor cleaner, the usual signs that Lauren was in one of her organizing moods. I was in the kitchen, pouring hot water over a tea bag, when I heard drawers opening and closing in the living room. Lauren was talking to herself, as she often did when she cleaned. Where did she put those coupons again? I swear that woman hides everything like it's gold. I didn't move. I just stirred my tea and waited. A few seconds later came the sound of paper rustling, then silence. Then her voice, high, sharp, full of disbelief. "Oh my God!" Another beat of silence. Then louder, almost a scream. "Brian, oh my God!" My hand froze midair. Footsteps pounded down the hall, fast. Brian's voice came from the stairs. "What? What's wrong?" "The ticket," she gasped. "It's the winning ticket, Evelyn's ticket." For a moment, everything stopped. Then came the explosion, the kind that doesn't need fire to burn. They shouted, laughed, screamed. I could hear the sound of paper crinkling, feet shuffling, a chair scraping across the floor. "Oh my God, we did it," Lauren yelled, her voice breaking into laughter. "We're millionaires. Brian, we're millionaires." I walked to the doorway, teacup in hand, and leaned lightly against the frame. They were holding each other, spinning in circles in the living room. Brian's face was red, eyes wide like a boy's. Lauren had tears running down her cheeks, clutching the ticket like it was holy. For a moment, I thought how strange it was, how joy could look so much like madness. Lauren finally noticed me standing there. "Mom, oh my God, do you realize what this means?" I smiled faintly. "I might have an idea." She ran toward me, waving the ticket in the air. "This changes everything for all of us. Everything. We can move, travel, finally live without worrying. It's like—" I cut her off gently. "For all of us?" Her face lit up, too excited to notice my tone. "Of course, you'll never have to worry again, Evelyn. None of us will. We're rich." Brian was already on his phone, pacing. "We need to call a lawyer, maybe the lottery office. There's a process, right? Taxes, paperwork." Lauren was still talking fast, her voice tumbling over itself. "Oh, and that basement plan? Forget it. We'll build something better. Maybe we all move into a bigger house, with a view of the ocean. You could have your own wing, Evelyn, your own." She stopped when she saw my expression. I wasn't smiling anymore. I took a small sip of my tea, the steam rising between us like a quiet wall. "Lauren," I said softly, "did you even look at the name on that ticket?" For a moment, she just blinked, confused. Then she turned the paper in her hand. Her smile froze. Brian looked up from his phone. "What do you mean?" I nodded toward the ticket. "The name. The signature line." They both stared at it. The silence stretched thin. Lauren's voice cracked. You signed it?" I nodded again. "Yes, I bought it. Same as I've done every week for 32 years. Her face drained of color. "But you live here. We're family. That money, it's for—" I set the teacup down gently on the counter. The porcelain clicked against the surface. "It's for me," I said, calm and clear. The words hung in the air like smoke. Brian took a slow step forward. "Mom, let's not be hasty. You have to admit this affects all of us. We're family." "Yes," I said quietly. And family, I thought, meant love and respect, not rent and chores. Lauren opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I picked up my tea again, the steam still curling into the cold air. "Don't worry," I said softly. "This changes everything." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, for all of us." I looked at her then, really looked. The woman who told me to move into the basement, who'd smiled while calling my Social Security check a contribution. I smiled faintly. "No, Lauren. For me." The room went silent again. The only sound was the faint tick of the wall clock. Outside, the snow kept falling, slow and steady, like time refusing to stop for anyone. Lauren stared at the ticket in her hand, and I could almost see the realization flicker across her face that the house she ruled, the life she'd controlled, had just slipped out of her hands. I finished my tea, set the cup in the sink, and walked past them toward my room. They stood frozen in the living room, still holding the ticket, still trying to make sense of what just happened. In the hallway, I stopped for a moment and glanced back. Lauren was whispering something to Brian, her voice trembling. He looked pale. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But some fires burn quietly, and some are meant to. I closed my bedroom door. The house had gone completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from fear. Lauren stood in the middle of the living room, the lottery ticket shaking slightly in her hand. Brian was beside her, pale, trying to look calm but failing. I stayed by the doorway, my hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. No one spoke for a long time. The clock ticked once. Then again. Finally, I said quietly, "You might want to check whose name is on that ticket." Lauren blinked, confused, then looked down. The words were there, clear as day. Evelyn Harper, printed in bold on the signature line. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she looked up at me, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but the words got stuck somewhere in her throat. Brian took a step forward, his voice too soft to be steady. "Mom, what does this mean?" "It means," I said, calm as ever, "that I bought it. My ticket. My money." Lauren's face drained of color. "But we're family." I nodded. "We are." I took a small step closer. "And family doesn't charge rent and call it kindness." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Lauren looked down again, staring at my name like she could erase it if she just wanted it badly enough. "You can't just take it. You can't just leave." I smiled, the kind of smile that feels lighter than air after years of caring too much. "Watch me." Brian tried to say something, but I lifted my hand slightly, and he stopped. For once, they listened. The quiet stretched long enough for the sound of the old heater to fill the room. I could smell the faint scent of burned dust. It reminded me of all the mornings I'd spent cleaning this house, making breakfast, paying bills that weren't mine, trying to be useful in a place that never wanted me. I looked around the room, really looked. The dining table was covered with papers, unpaid bills, cost-sharing spreadsheets, Lauren's color-coded expense charts, and the new basement design still rolled up at one end. It all looked so small now, so desperate. The camera would have lingered there, on the table, the papers, the blueprint, all the little symbols of greed and guilt, the quiet evidence of two people who had turned family into business. Lauren was still trembling, clutching the ticket. Her voice cracked. "We didn't mean, it wasn't what?" I asked softly. "Exploitation, calculation, or just good management?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Brian's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, please, we can figure this out." I turned to him. "No, Brian, you already did. You figured out exactly how much my pension could cover, how much you could save by keeping me here, how far you could push before I broke." His eyes fell. He didn't deny it. I picked up one of the papers from the table, Lauren's list of shared household expenses, and looked at the numbers. Rent, utilities, groceries, every month. My handwriting next to each check I'd written. Then I set the paper back down. "It's funny," I said softly. "You called it cost sharing, but somehow I was always the one paying the cost." Lauren's voice was small now. "Evelyn, we just thought that I wouldn't notice," I interrupted gently, "that I'd stay grateful for the scraps you gave me." I walked past them to the counter, picked up my coat, and slipped it on. The teacup from earlier still sat in the sink, the rim marked with lipstick. I rinsed it out, placed it upside down on the rack, and dried my hands slowly. Behind me, Lauren's breathing grew unsteady. "Please don't go," she said. We can talk about this." I turned, my coat buttoned, my bag on my shoulder. "We've done enough talking. I spent 2 years listening. It's time you learned how silence feels." Brian took a step closer. "Where will you go?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Somewhere that doesn't charge admission for love." I paused at the doorway, the snowlight from outside falling across the floor. The air in the house was heavy, not warm, just thick. Then I said quietly, "Don't worry. This house will still have everything it had before. Bills, debts, and the two of you." Lauren started to cry, but I didn't look back. I walked down the hallway, past the guest room that had never really been mine, past the photographs on the wall where my picture was missing, and opened the front door. The wind hit cold and clean. Behind me, I heard Brian whisper, "What are we going to do?" Lauren didn't answer. I stepped outside, the snow crunching under my shoes. The door closed softly behind me. Inside, the heater clicked off. The sound of paper fluttered, a draft passing over the dining table, rustling the bills and blueprints. The camera would pan slowly across the scene, the documents, the basement sketch, the empty mug, until it landed on the lottery ticket sitting under the dim light, the name Evelyn Harper, clear and still. And in that quiet house with all its plans and numbers, you could almost feel it, the moment the power changed hands for good. Soft piano fades in. It started with one news van. By noon, there were 5 parked along the snowy curb, cameras and microphones waiting like birds on a wire. From my bedroom window, I could see Lauren pacing by the front door, her hair done, her coat pressed, rehearsing her lines. She had that smile she used for neighbors and real estate agents, all charm, no warmth. When the first reporter knocked, she rushed to open it. "Oh yes, we're just so thrilled for our family," she said brightly, posing with practiced ease. "It's such a blessing. We're all so happy for our family's good fortune." The words rolled out smooth as butter. "Our family's blessing." She said it twice just to make sure the cameras caught it. I stayed upstairs watching. For a long time, I wasn't sure whether to say anything. I'd always believed that truth had its own timing, that it comes when it's ready. But then, standing there by the window, I saw someone step out of a dark blue car across the street. Marjorie Quinn. Her red scarf was the same one she'd worn at that dinner party months ago, the night she was the only one who saw me for what I was, not what I'd been turned into. She walked straight through the snow, her heels crunching against the ice, and spoke quietly to one of the reporters. Then she looked up at me and nodded once, just like an old friend saying, "It's time." When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face like truth itself. Lauren froze mid-sentence. "Oh, Mom," she stammered, trying to sound casual. "We were just—" I walked past her. The cameras turned, microphones lifted. Someone asked, "Mrs. Harper, can we get a comment?" I nodded. "You may." The silence that followed was almost sacred. Then I spoke. "For the past 2 years," I said, my voice steady, "I paid rent to live in my son's house. I paid for groceries, for utilities. I took care of their children. I cooked their meals. I cleaned their house." I looked straight into the camera. "I think I've contributed enough." Lauren's face went pale. The questions came fast. Reporters leaning closer, pens moving. "Are you saying they charged you rent?" "Yes," I said simply. $1,300 a month. "And now that you've won the lottery?" another asked. "Now," I said, "I'll be living on my own, with peace, and without rent." The air felt different after that. The words hung there, not angry, not bitter, just real. Marjorie stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on my arm. She smiled through tears. "You did the right thing, Evelyn." "I just told the truth," I said. By evening, it was everywhere. The $48 million grandma who fought back. It was on the Oregon Chronicle's homepage on the 6 p.m. news, and halfway across the internet before Lauren even knew what hit her. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some calls were from strangers, people, thanking me, saying they wished they'd had the courage to stand up for themselves. Others were from lawyers, reporters, even a women's advocacy group in Portland. And then there was one call that changed everything again. "Mrs. Harper? This is Grace Leland. I'm an attorney. Your husband Henry retained me 3 years ago." My heart stopped for a second. "My husband?" "Yes. He asked me to contact you only under certain conditions. Specifically, if your family ever attempted to take advantage of your finances or living situation." There was a pause. My hand tightened around the phone. He did that?" "Yes, ma'am. And he left instructions for me to inform you that the Silver Anchor Trust was established under your name. It contains $400,000, set aside for your protection." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, staring at the sunlight spilling across the floor. Henry, even now, 2 years after he was gone, he was still watching out for me, still keeping his promise. Grace's voice softened. "Your husband said you'd probably never use it unless you had no other choice. He wanted you to know you were never alone." I closed my eyes, a tear slipping down before I could stop it. "Thank you," I whispered. "Please tell him." "Well, you know," she laughed gently. "I think he already knows." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the cup of tea gone cold in front of me. The house was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one was peaceful, whole. Later that afternoon, I met with Grace in person. She was young, sharp, with kind eyes, the kind of woman Henry would have liked. She laid out the trust documents, the terms, the letter Henry had written. In his handwriting, the same slanted loops I'd known since I was 19, were the words, "If Evelyn ever needs this, it means she finally learned what you always had in you. Strength. Don't let the world make you small. You are the anchor now." I folded the letter carefully, holding it to my chest. The reporters kept calling for weeks after that, wanting follow-ups, interviews, quotes, but I didn't give them more than one sentence, the one I gave them that first day. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's quiet, and it shows up when you finally stop waiting for permission to live. Lauren and Brian stayed silent. They didn't try to reach me again. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they finally understood. Either way, it didn't matter. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the water, not far from the old pier where Henry used to fish. The air smelled like salt and memory. Some nights, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and whisper, "You did it, Henry. You really did." Because it turned out, love can protect you even when it's gone. It was raining again that night, heavy, cold rain that made the world outside look like it was wrapped in glass. The house on Harbor Hill looked the same as always, bright lights in every window, a perfect picture for anyone driving by. But inside, it felt hollow. Empty in the way only guilt can make a place feel, Lauren called earlier that day. Her voice had been soft, almost trembling. "Mom, we just want to talk. Over dinner, maybe." I agreed. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted closure. When I arrived, the air inside smelled of wine and tension. The dining table was set neatly, 2 glasses already poured. Brian stood near the fireplace, pretending to adjust the picture frames. Lauren sat at the table, trying to look composed. I took my seat across from them. The chair creaked. For a while, no one spoke. The clock ticked loudly in the background, the same clock that had marked every hour I'd spent in that house, cleaning, cooking, trying not to feel invisible. Lauren finally broke the silence. We wanted to clear the air," she said. "Things got out of hand with the reporters. People misunderstood." I nodded once, then reached into my bag and placed a thick folder on the table. "This should help us clear the air," I said. Brian frowned. "What's that?" I slid the folder toward them. "Your finances." Lauren hesitated, then flipped it open. Her face drained of color almost instantly. Inside were bank statements, overdue credit card bills, a tax notice, and a list of debts that stretched pages long. Her voice cracked. "You had no right to dig into our finances." I met her eyes, calm and steady. "I didn't," I said softly. "Your father did. 2 years ago." Brian looked up sharply. "Dad?" "Yes," I said. "He didn't trust what grief might make you capable of. He wanted to protect me. From you." The words landed like thunder. Lauren pushed back her chair, her voice shaking. "You think we wanted to hurt you? We were struggling. You don't understand the pressure we were under." I kept my hands folded on the table. You didn't have to mean it for it to hurt. For a moment, no one moved. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence, tapping against the glass, like a metronome keeping time with every lie they told. Brian's voice softened. "Mom, please. We made mistakes, but we love you. We lost control." I looked at him, really looked. My son. The boy who used to collect seashells with me on the beach. The man who now stood in front of me, smaller than I'd ever seen him. "You didn't lose control," I said quietly. "You gave it away." He dropped his gaze. Lauren was crying now, not the silent kind, but the panicked, desperate kind that comes when there's nothing left to say. I stood slowly, gathering my coat from the chair. The room felt smaller somehow, heavier. "You know," I said, looking at them both, "your father used to tell you something. I don't think you ever really listened." They looked up. "A man who forgets his roots loses his soul?" Brian swallowed hard. "Mom." I shook my head. He wasn't warning me, Brian. He was talking to you. The air seemed to stop moving. The rain outside grew louder, as if the world itself was listening. I picked up my car keys, slipping them into my coat pocket. Lauren reached for me. Please don't go like this. I already left a long time ago, I said gently. You just didn't notice. I took one last look at them, two people sitting at a table covered in unpaid bills and empty glasses, the symbols of everything they'd chosen over love. Then I turned toward the door. The wind howled as I opened it, rain blowing in sideways, sharp and cold. Behind me, I heard Brian say something, but his voice was drowned out by the storm. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. The slam echoed through the house like an ending. Walking to my car, the rain hit my face hard enough to sting, but it felt cleansing, like washing the last traces of that house off me. When I started the engine, I caught a glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. Bright, still, silent. Inside, I imagined them sitting there, realizing what they'd done, what they'd lost. Henry's voice came to me then, quiet and certain, the way it always did when I needed it most. Justice doesn't always come from anger, Evelyn. Sometimes it just walks out the door. I drove away into the rain. No music, no tears, just peace. The windshield wipers kept their steady rhythm, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like noise. It sounded like freedom. The sea was calm that morning, the kind of calm that doesn't come often on the Oregon coast. Waves moved slow and steady, rolling against the shore like they'd been waiting for the world to quiet down. From the window of my new apartment, I could see the docks glimmering under the early light. The air smelled like salt and new beginnings. For the first time in years, I woke up without that tight feeling in my chest, the one that comes from walking on eggshells in someone else's house. This place was mine. The apartment wasn't big, just 2 rooms, a balcony, and an old wooden table I'd found at a thrift shop. But it had something the other house never did. Warmth. The morning light poured across the walls, soft and gold, touching everything it could reach. On the far side of the living room hung a new sign, small silver letters mounted on a white frame. Silver Anchor Foundation for Seniors' Dignity. Grace helped me register it a week ago. The trust Henry left had grown quietly over the years, and now it had a purpose, to help other older folks who'd been treated the way I had, pushed aside, talked over, made to feel small in their own families. Silver Anchor. It was Henry's phrase from his last letter. You are the anchor now. Every time I looked at that sign, I could almost hear his voice. Calm, proud. I was standing by the kitchen counter pouring coffee when I heard the knock on the door. 3 quick taps, soft, familiar. When I opened it, Ellie was there. Her coat was too big for her hair messy under her knit hat, but her smile could have lit the whole hallway. Grandma, she said, running into my arms. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her small hands against mine. There's my sunshine, I whispered. She pulled back just enough to look at me. You're on TV again, she said breathlessly. Mom said you're famous now. I laughed. Did she now? Ellie nodded, eyes wide. They said you helped people, that you made a charity for old folks, and that you were really brave. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Well, I said softly, I just told the truth, that's all. She grinned. Grandma, they said you're the lady who stood up for herself. That made me smile wider than I had in a long time. Then I guess they got that part right. Ellie climbed onto the couch, legs swinging. Can I see the ocean from here? I opened the sliding door and let her step onto the balcony. The wind was cold but gentle. The horizon stretched wide, blue and gold and endless. She leaned over the railing, pointing. Look, seagulls. I watched her for a while, her laughter, her wonder. Then she turned back to me. Grandma, are you happy now? I didn't have to think about it. Yes, sweetheart, I said. I am. She ran back inside, talking about school and her new puppy and a song she was learning for the Christmas concert. Her voice filled the room with life. After she left, I stood by the door for a long time, looking at the space she'd just occupied, that small burst of joy still lingering in the air. Then I walked to the balcony again. The morning had grown brighter, the ocean sparkling under the sun. Somewhere down the beach, I could hear the faint bell of a fishing boat leaving the harbor, the same sound Henry and I used to wake up to. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, the salt, the wind, the peace, and in that moment I felt him. Not as a memory, but as something real, like he'd never really gone. His voice came quietly, the way it always had when the world was still. "You did it, Evie." I smiled. "No, Henry," I whispered. "We did." The camera would have pulled back then, slow and wide, the balcony framed against the vast sky, the foundation sign glowing faintly in the corner. Below, the water shimmered like glass. And there she was, the woman who'd been thrown out of her own family's house, who'd found not just justice, but peace, standing in the sunlight, smiling softly as the sea breathed around her. The screen would fade to white as her voice returned one last time. "Let them see what freedom looks like." Fade out. Soft piano, waves, the sound of a heart finally at rest. The sea was calm again. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across the living room, soft and golden, turning everything it touched to warmth. The radio played quietly from the counter, one of those small local stations that always mixed news with easy music. And in local headlines, the announcer said, his voice gentle and measured, Maple Harbor resident Evelyn Harper, the widow who famously won $48 million in last year's Powerball, has turned her winnings into something extraordinary. The Silver Anchor Foundation, Kako, created in her name, now supports senior citizens experiencing financial or family exploitation across Oregon. He paused briefly. A remarkable story of resilience, dignity, and the power of standing up for oneself. Then came the faint strum of a guitar leading into another song. I reached over and turned the radio off. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. On the desk by the window sat a half-finished letter, written in my careful old handwriting. The paper smelled faintly of salt and ink. I read the first line again. "Forgiveness is optional. Freedom is not." I let the pen rest for a moment, thinking about those words. For a long time, I thought forgiveness was something I owed everyone. My son, my daughter-in-law, the world that had made me small. But freedom, that was something I owed myself. I picked up the pen and kept writing. I thought I lost everything when Henry died. Turns out he left me something greater than love, the courage to demand respect. The rain had stopped outside, and through the open balcony door, I could hear the slow rhythm of the waves. Somewhere down the coast, a gull cried, the same sound I used to hear on the mornings when Henry would bring me coffee in bed, laughing about the birds stealing bait from fishermen. I smiled. The letter wasn't for anyone in particular. Maybe for Ellie one day. Maybe for whoever needed to read it. Or maybe just for me. On the desk beside the letter sat a small silver photo frame, Henry, standing at the pier in his old wool coat, smiling into the wind. He looked the way I wanted to remember him, strong, kind, still carrying that quiet certainty that everything would be okay. "Turns out you were right again, Henry," I whispered. "You always said justice had good timing." The light shifted as the sun lowered toward the horizon. The walls glowed pink and gold, the way the sea sometimes looks just before evening falls. I walked out onto the balcony, holding my tea, letting the air fill my lungs. The scent of salt and driftwood hung in the breeze. From up here, I could see the small sign below the window, the one that read, Silver Anchor Foundation for Seniors' Dignity. Every week I met people who reminded me of my old self, quiet, polite, scared to speak up. And every time I told them the same thing. You don't have to fight loud to win. You just have to stop apologizing for being alive. The sun touched the edge of the ocean. Light spread across the water in ribbons of pink and gold. Somewhere, a bell rang from the docks. That same deep, steady sound that had followed me through every chapter of this life. I thought of Ellie and her wide smile, of Grace and her careful handwriting on legal papers, of Marjorie and her quiet nod the day I stepped forward. All of them part of the same truth, that no woman stands alone once she decides she deserves peace. I turned back toward the apartment one last time, glancing at the letter still drying on the desk. Forgiveness is optional. Freedom is not. He left me courage. I'll leave the same for others. Outside, the wind picked up gently, brushing my hair across my face. I closed my eyes and breathed in the sea. For the first time, the sound of the waves didn't make me ache. It felt like home. The camera would pull back slowly from the balcony to the sea to the horizon painted in soft light. The ocean opened wide beneath the sky, endless and forgiving. And then, a single glimmer of pink sunlight broke across the water, rising like a promise.